Hello friends, and welcome to figure study number 300. Wow, I'm still kind of amazed that it's gotten this far, but yes, video number 300, we are taking a look at Webdiver Wyverion. Because, as I may have mentioned previously, Wyverion was kind of my personal grail, and now I have Wyverion. And I figured, why not do that for the big 300th video? Not that I have anything major planned other than just, oh hey, we're going to take a look at something that's important and significant to me, but yeah, it fits. So yes, Wyverion. This thing is so weird and I love it. You can see there's a little bit of an issue with the one I have with this little bit flopping down. It's fine. I don't really want to try and fix it because it's like the hinge is plenty tight when you come around. So I don't want to make that hinge tighter than it already is. It just stinks that it does that. But these things are so rarely listed on eBay or seen in the wild for me that I was like, screw it. I'm just going to grab it while I can. And it was a good price. Anyway, yes, Wyverion is so weird. It's like vaguely evocative of a World War I, World War II era plane. It's like a seaplane because it's got the big pontoons. I almost want to say it makes me think of a biplane, but it's not because it doesn't have two sets of wings. So, I don't know, but it's an interesting design. The color scheme is, primarily black, but then you've got some nice bits of white and silver accenting and like some smaller details done in this kind of orangey yellow and red. Like it looks like a plane. It doesn't necessarily look like a normal plane, but it definitely looks like a plane. The wings are a little bit strange in how they're swept forward like that, which is because of the, transformation, but yeah, it's irregular, but it works. I love all the little details on this thing. Like the little engine exhausts there, the silver propeller that has kind of like almost like a webbed winged look to the blades, which I guess spoilers. Oh, that's interesting. It looks like the propeller may have sheared off at one point and been re-glued. I never noticed that before. Not that that really matters. It's, given how difficult this thing's been for me to find and the price I got, it's fine. Lots and lots of nice little details. There's these bits here that look like, if you just look at the molding, these look like they're supposed to be machine guns, which do kind of fit with the older planes. They had those mounted machine guns for dogfighting. Looking at the wings, you get some nice molded detail in there, as well as some of that digitized circuitry stuff that's pretty common with Webdiver stuff. You can't have the internet without circuitry in the 90s. Some nice little patterning and what could be exhausts on these engine things on the wings here. A very sunken in and hard to make out cockpit. I think this section looks cool in how the orange and white and silver is all kind of distributed, these little patterns and designs and molds. That does look cool. It's just that the cockpit itself is so tiny, just in comparison to everything else. And it doesn't look bad. I just kind of, I don't know, I feel like it would look a little bit better if the cockpit were a little bit larger, a little bit more pronounced, a little bit more obviously a cockpit, but it's okay. It also would probably look a little bit less tiny if it didn't have these massive guns on both sides, kind of making it like encompassing everything. And then along the back, we've got a few more things like the little IR thing there that I took the batteries out because I didn't want the contacts getting messed up, but there's a little IR sensor, right? That whole thing right in there. And the tail fin, which has some almost scale-like patterning going along the sides, which will make much more sense in a bit. And then, of course, there are the big pontoons on the bottom there that, would allow it to land on water, theoretically. I haven't watched the show. I don't know exactly what these are, like whether these serve any kind of function other than just being a detail of the plane. But they work. They also have kind of like a 1950s, 1960s style Cadillac thing going here with like the curves and the lines going across there. Just kind of interesting. But yes, Wyverion's plane mode it's strange, but it's a good kind of strange. I do like it. Again, I think more than anything, I just wish that cockpit was more pronounced. Anyway, bringing out the staple size comparisons, you can see Wyverion is pretty decent size. Definitely not to scale with the Deluxe, but they're not even the same toy line, so it's fine. And you can also see how Wyverion's got much more of a almost overdone, but in a good way, kind of tech theme going in terms of design. Definitely less grounded in reality. And here's Wyverion with the duck tank. Unfortunately, due to the leak situation that I mentioned last week, I don't really have access to any other Webdiver stuff that I can do a size comparison with on this guy. So, my apologies. I am just kind of limited due to really crappy circumstances. Anyway, let's get him transformed into his not vehicle mode. And here we have Wyverion in his, yeah, that's totally why I wanted to hunt this down mode. It's so weird and wonderful and different. I always appreciate different. When it comes to Transformers and stuff, I always appreciate different. That doesn't mean different is always successful, but I always appreciate it whenever any company tries to do something distinctly different with transformations in terms of like really peculiar robot modes, off-the-wall strangeness. I don't mean to imply that I'm getting sick of humanoid robots, because I'm not. I am not getting sick of humanoid robots, but it's always so nice and refreshing to see something that's not a humanoid robot. And yes, I know Wyverion came out close to 20 years ago, but still, it's just really nice when things are a little bit different, and Wyverion is definitely that. The transformation's really simple, but it gets a lot done, and it creates this really interesting, non-typical dragon mode. Like, even as far as dragons go, this thing is interesting, because it doesn't have back legs, it's just the tail. It's almost like a winged snake that has arms, as opposed to, like, say, a wyvern or a dragon, which has like back legs and forelegs, depending on whether it's a wyvern or a dragon. The wings may be attached to the back and they'll have 4 legs, or it'll be 2 rear legs and then the 4 legs will also be kind of integrated into the wings. But this, very different. It's almost like a winged seahorse with arms. I don't know. It's just cool. I really like this design. I also really appreciate how surprisingly a lot of the plane detail that you see in, the plane mode, you don't really get here. Like, it reveals a lot of new detail, most of which is on the underside, but still, you get this really nice red from the underside of the tail, get the claws coming out now, and the pontoons are much more pronounced, much more obvious as to why they're there. Some nice little detailed shoulder pads, these wings that are a bit on the thin side, but still work, and because these are the undersides of the wings, you have new detailing, new patterning. It's not as black as the top of the wings. You don't have that digitized circuitry detail going through the wings anymore. Now you've got this kind of paneled white layered effect, and then like a little bit of silver up there too. I mean, some of the details are the same, like the whoop. That's the problem with him not having legs. Like the what is now the chest was the back of the plane mode, but like there's very little here when you're looking at them from the front that you really see in plane mode. Like, even the undersides of the wings here, what were the engines, you now have these really cool looking, like, red and black jetpack things. I don't really know what those are supposed to be, but it looks good. And the entire front section of the plane with the prop and everything just rotates around completely to put that head up there. It's really good stuff. Bringing Wyverion in for a look at a little bit more closer detail, you can see that he is able to balance, as you saw on that tail. And you've got these kind of, almost like, it makes me think of like the underside of a snake, with these kind of segmented bits going down the underside here. That nice deep red. You get a little bit of articulation, and now the scale pattern makes a lot more sense for that rear tail. The pontoon claws also work pretty well. You can move these around if you want. That's more for the combination with, what's the... Gradion? I think? Gladion? The train guy. But, you can if you want to make it not have him, like, with the elbows poking way out. But he's got these cool kind of serrated on top, for some reason, claws. Here you can see, again, those shoulder pads, which have some nice detailing on them and also are nicely painted with the silver and the orangey, yellowy, that's orange. Though now the machine guns are pointed backwards, which is, it's fine. But it does create this interesting pattern here with these 3 bits on either side kind of jutting out, almost looking like spiked plates or something. And again, you can see the wing detail here, which it just looks nice. This texture is a little weird. It's kind of like house siding for some reason. But, in the grand scheme of things, it looks nice with the patterns and everything. And turning them around real quick, you can see how different the patterning is on the plane wing versus the dragon wing. There's so much more white in there. Totally different texture. And of course, the shape changes, because in the plane mode, this is the front. In the dragon mode, this is the top, but it kind of works as the front too. As for the chest itself, as I said, I took out the batteries, so the IR thing doesn't work anymore, but you can see a little bit of a molded, I want to say dragon shape in there. It's a very stylized one where it's like little bat wings and a head, but I mean, it's fitting, given, he's called Wyverion. The head's interesting. I think it's cool how the neck totally mimics the design style of the tail, where you've got that red kind of segmented plated look on the underside. And then you've got the white kind of scaly look on the sides and a little bit of silver, as you can see back here. A little bit of silver going up the back. And then the head itself, you get what is obviously a dragonish, wyvernish head with these little frills on the side that almost make me think it's more aquatic in nature. I don't know, it just comes off as more like gill slits or something. I think I play too much Monster Hunter and have dealt with too many plesioths. God, I hate plesioths. Anyway, it's cool, and it's also interesting how it's like it's a dragon, but it also seems to be wearing some kind of bladed helmet that goes around the top of the head. You get these silver kind of spiky bits along the sides and the top, which are also painted. And I also appreciate that they painted the eyes inside there. They're kind of deeply set in there, which is why it's impressive to me. And yeah, it's an overall cohesive look. It's got this weird mixture of elements. It feels very 90s in terms of like all the kind of overly designed plating and little textury bits and stuff, but it totally works and looks freaking awesome. And again, as I said, like I love more than anything just how different this guy is. Moving on to size comparisons, you can see that he's with that neck, he gets pretty tall. You could consider it cheating because he's standing on his tail. You can have him leaning forward, so he's more like on a tripod thing with like the tail and the claws acting as like his support. But he definitely gets big. Of course, most of the mass is in just the center here. Like the wings themselves are actually pretty thin, but he spreads out pretty nicely. And of course, now that he's transformed, he is a lot bigger than the duck tank. And that is going to do it for Webdiver Wyverion. I'm sorry that this wasn't a more involved, complicated, higher production value video. For number 300, it's just... I'm limited by things like time and a lot of my stuff being packed away because of that leak I mentioned earlier. I will freely admit that my Grail is probably not incredibly Grail-like in comparison to other Grails. Like, it's not super old, it's not super obscure. It's not like a G1 Overlord or something like that, but it's really interesting and cool to me, and was incredibly difficult for me to track down. I'd been wanting to get my hands on one for years since I got back into collecting, which is like think like 5 or 6 years ago at this point, and it took almost that long for me to finally be in the right place at the right time and snag one, and I'm not disappointed. I would probably be disappointed if I spent like $200 on this thing, which I was fully prepared to do, but for what I paid, for what it is, I think it's really cool. It's not something that I would take out and like do a lot of poses with, because you can't really do much, because there's not a whole lot of, like, the arms move up and down, the wings kind of fluctuate a little bit, you can kind of turn the head and move it up and down, but like he doesn't have legs. So you are really limited in how you can pose him, unless you have a flight stand, I guess, but that'd have to be a pretty heavy-duty flight stand, because this he's like third-party figure heavy. He's not like, you know, a modern Voyager where you could peg him in and not have to worry about things collapsing. Like this is, regardless, that has been my look at Webdiver Wyverion. What do you all think of this guy? Is he just too weird for you? Is it kind of like a Revenge of the Fallen Demolisher, where it's just too weird? Is it something that you've been wanting to get your hands on and just haven't been able to track down? Do you have an affinity for Webdiver stuff, or do you not care? Whatever your thoughts, feel free to chime in down below. I always enjoy hearing from you all. And while you're at it, also feel free to like, subscribe, or if you're feeling generous, you could buy me a coffee. Any of those things would make me a happy Rob. And remember, art is more than meets the eye.